Layton have kind of carried this this conference that you're sitting at, and we've gone to a few different places. They aren't really making money on this. So think about that, like the amount of time away from family, and energy and effort, and what it means to you, and the price it's provided at. So I don't know, a round of applause, or just express your appreciation. They're doing awesome, you know. But I just think if you guys get the opportunity, they're pushing for something a little bit greater than just a knowledge share. There's something to this being a community that they believe in, and I think you guys are benefiting just from their heart in that. So it's pretty cool. And so yeah, even the sheet. I'll be talking a lot about what that is, but some of that's going towards just making this go happen. So cool. Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here, hanging out with you guys, and talking about tending to the life of the soil. It's a pretty cool topic, and for us as farmers in Hawaii, it's been a big deal. We have a family farm, and the profitability and just overall success has been pretty well changed just by, instead of looking at the tree and what the tree's doing, looking at the soil and how that is affecting what the tree's doing. It's been massive for us. So I'll jump into that, and it's cool to see that a bunch of you know what natural farming is, and I don't know where everybody is, so because of that, this year, maybe next year we come back and we get into all nitty gritty, and the people that don't know what natural farming is are just going to be left behind and have to ask you. But this year I'm going to play a line somewhere between an introduction to the concepts and sharing knowledge to kind of put some tools in your pocket. So I grew up on a farm. I was born, my dad was farming when I was born, and we farmed pigs and cattle, ranch cattle, and eggplant and pineapple and all of it. It was a lot of fun. I'm grateful for that. And somewhere along the line, it fell to me to make some decisions and work towards profitability as a farm. And we had a hard time sometimes in farming, and a pretty significant crop failure happened that caused us to look at what the soil life was doing, what our trees were showing us that our extension agent couldn't explain to us. And through a series of really cool opportunities, I had Elaine Ingham come to our town, and this guy Chohan Yu, the kind of iteration of natural farming that's widely shared right now, came from him, though this is more of a broad Asian practice, traditional farming method. But those things happened for us on our farm back in 2008, 2009, and then really got going for us in 2011. And we're currently more profitable than we've been in 30 years as a family farm, and it's by and large attributed to a slightly different way of farming, though the whole business model still looks the same, where our bottom line has changed. So that's kind of why I'm here. I farm regeneratively on 700 acres. It's scalable. I live on an island where all inputs and things to bring in are as expensive as it gets. And so we basically produce all our inputs on farm at 700 acres. So this is totally doable. We don't have a huge crew. Right now, my natural farming crew is 2 people, 1.5. One person's a part-time manager, part-time natural farmer. So this, for 700 acres, to make everything and apply everything is basically a 2-person crew. Pretty fun. Yeah, so the plant above ground represents the life or the health of your system below ground. This is real. This is not a theory, and I know you guys have heard a lot about that in the last few days. What I'm going to do is touch on some of the scientific reasons why, but I think you guys are pretty well, like, okay, yes, I have to tend to the life of the soil, that's why you're here. So I'm also going to talk a little bit of the practical avenue to get this done. And if you don't know, in natural farming, I've taken some time to make some videos. They're on YouTube. You can bump your neighbor or get that, but you can just search my name, Chris Trump, and that'll give you a lot of the tools to how to make some of this stuff. And there'll continue to be a bunch more of that. All right. So by tending to the soil microbial life, farmers can increase nutrient uptake, suppress disease, and directly affect profitability. I think Elaine talked to you a little bit on Thursday or Friday about how much nutrient is in soil. There's tons of nutrients in soil. We currently farm nitrogen-wise for about not even 1/100th of the recommended nitrogen application rate for our crop. So the entire world disagrees with our nutrient application amounts per year, our entire industry. And we farm at about 25% higher yields than anyone in our state, in our industry. It doesn't work, right? And so we get a lot of people like, you guys, when we first started, you're crazy. You can't do it like that. Nobody does it like that. You can't stop applying fertilizer and increase yields, and we do. We apply a tiny bit of fish fertilizer, liquid fish fertilizer, but now, 7-8 years into us doing this, farm-wide, they're coming over and they're so, what are you doing? See, we're making more money than them now. And that's a big deal. So now we didn't have to say, hey, you should come check out what we're doing. Our trees look better, we're not dealing with the same diseases they're dealing with, and our yields are up by 25% of what they're getting with a pretty significant fertilizer budget. And so this thing we're going to talk about, I'm here, a little part of why I'm here is to say, yeah, I do this, it works. And if it's a little bit of work to wrap your head around it and get into it and make it your own, it's worth it. So yeah, don't feel hopeful that even though there's been a little bit of, well, you can't do that, you're gonna ruin everything. That, just plow ahead. You can do. There's a lot of grace in nature, and even in your crop. So take small steps and experiment with one plant instead of your whole crop, and you're gonna have a blast. And I know a lot of you already are, so that's cool. How do soil microbial communities affect plant production? So one of the needs in research, and this is where sometimes all the things don't connect. We have these really cool studies, but they don't necessarily connect to us as a farmer. So we're like, oh, that's cool. Like, how do I make use of that for my bottom line or for my production? And so one of the areas that would be really cool to see these tie-ins would be agroecosystem management. So microbial research in agroecosystem management. So if you're connected with the university and you're trying to do trials, it would be really neat if you're like, okay, and how can we use that for managing agroecosystems? Not just in, we need to learn the information, we need to get the data, but then we need to see, okay, now that data applied and financial viability, all these things looked at. And so that's one of the issues, if I could say I have an issue with some of what we get from academic studies, is how does it apply to a farmer's bottom line in managing? So soil microbial health. So this is, in natural farming, we talk about indigenous microorganisms, IMO. I'll use IMO from now on. Ooh. Can we turn the heat down, or should I stand on this side? I should stand on this side, away from those. I'm gonna drink. So we talk about IMO. The concepts in natural farming are that we use indigenous microbes, generally because they like our barometric pressure, our rainfall, our temperature. So they're gonna thrive, especially if you're growing outdoors, they're gonna thrive when you bring them and put them on your land as an inoculum. They're not gonna struggle. They've been living in that environment for 1,000 years. They're going to self-perpetuate. Whereas sometimes if you have something that's been grown out in a lab or in specific conditions, it really does. I don't knock bugs in the jug. I think they are very effective. However, you often see a 6-month fall off where they're effective for a time, but you lose effectiveness over time. And that's just because they don't self-perpetuate very well in your system. Should I do something different for that, Buzz? No? Just hold it down. I'll hold it down. So this is, in IMO production, what we're doing is we're causing a bloom of fungi, and then in the heat at the center of the piles, we're causing a sporulation. They don't like it being quite that hot, some of these big aerobic, large hyphal diameter fungi, and so they'll sporulate. And so what we end up with is a dry product, a dormant product that then I can spread on my land, and I'm basically spreading solid fungal seeds. That's what it looks like under the microscope when I'm done. It's just chocked full of this. That gets on my nice wet surface layer of leaves, etc., and goes to town because I've actually collected it from the surrounding area. So it self-perpetuates, and I get this incredible bloom, and I don't even have to tend to it because it's indigenous. It self-perpetuates in that environment. It's a lot of fun. These are a few studies. You can just, if you want to take a picture of this, these are a few studies on some of these topics. So about the nutrient uptake and bioavailability from the soil affected my microbial life. Biotic stress and soil-borne pathogen resistance. Here is another study that's interesting if you're into going down the rabbit hole of looking at peer-reviewable research. And then another one is the effect of the root microbiota on flower plasticity, which could really be useful just for you to wrap your head around for your industry, and as flower is your main crop. All right, so for those of you that have not jumped down the rabbit hole of natural farming, I want to give you kind of an analogy to help see what it is we're doing and why. So a plant root zone is really it's the inside of its guts. So if you were to think about your intestines, the inside of your intestines as the space around a plant's root, that would be a decent analogy as far as function. We have a human microbiota, a human biome or gut microbial life kind of colonies that happen that help us get nutrients from the things we put in, from our inputs. Plants are the same way, and it directly affects their profitability, how healthy this zone is. How many of you guys know that a person can get really, really sick if their human biome breaks down, right? We have all kinds of crazy diseases because people's have lost diversity in their gut biome. This is the same thing that we can have happening in plants, and we're thinking, I just need to put in better nutrients, they're just deficient in this, or this. We start chasing these deficiencies showing up in the leaves, when really there's plenty of that in your soil, or enough, it just needs to be in a healthy living environment able to be taken up. So this picture is really to demonstrate the similarity between the root zone of a plant and a human. And a lot of what I'll do today in natural farming is take human analogy for plants, because it actually helps us, because we intuitively understand how babies and human beings work, and we can actually use that because nature's really similar in mammals and plants, if we can look at them next to each other. All right, so I'm going to get super weird on you for making this analogy. There's a process known as FMT, or fecal matter or microbiota transplant. So somebody can be totally failing, they can be dying literally from a breakdown of microbiota in their gut. And somewhere along the way, I actually met the scientist who invented this in China last year. I was speaking about this in China to the International Macadamia Nut Society research panel, and he's like, I invented that technique and I've never heard anybody speak on it on stage, and he was really excited. Very, very FMT nerdy guy, but really sweet. But what's cool about this technique, and it's basically you take the diversity of microbiota or human biome, kind of gut microbial diversity from a healthy person, and you either in a pill or in a suppository, you give it to the unhealthy person and they become healthy. The cool thing about that is we don't really know, we don't understand why it works. So we're doing this to human beings with limited knowledge of why it works. The reality is the interconnectivity of the complex diversity of human microbial life, or microbial life in a human gut, is beyond our ability to currently understand. And we've actually embraced that in this technique and saying, but it works. The person's dying, now they're healthy. We just need to take the healthy person's stuff and put it in the unhealthy person, and everything works out. I use this analogy to say, to help us wrap our heads around, you don't actually have to understand every single microbe and all its interconnections. A little bust out of the burning of the scientific community as a whole. We don't understand almost anything at all on the interconnectivity of microbial life. We have had a system for many years of isolating a microbe and trying to study it in isolation. And that's effective. We can learn some things. But there is not enough computing power in the entirety of the world to analyze or properly look at the interconnectivity of microbial life in a healthy soil food web in a cubic inch of soil. We don't know how they interact with each other. We don't understand that. We are totally ignorant as a worldwide population of scientists. And that's okay. We can, however, benefit from the balance that nature establishes on its own. Just like FMT. We don't understand why that specific balance works, or even understand what the balance is. But we can take it from one person and give it to another and get the results. So that's kind of what we're doing with indigenous microorganisms. We're saying, I am growing a plant here, and my soil life is not diverse or thriving. So I'm going to go to a forest that hasn't been messed with for 1,000 years, or a thriving wild ecosystem. I'm going to take some of the soil FMT, a farmer's own inoculum, and I'm going to restore or establish great diversity and a thriving microbial community in my cropland. I don't have to understand every microbe in that system to benefit from it and have thriving plants and a productive system. Does that make sense? Okay. Sorry, I apologize for my strange analogy, but it's helped everybody get on board. All right, so this is an example of an earth fort analysis of some IMO number 3 from actually this time last year on our farm. And what I'm going for here is, again, a dry product. So this is a dormant or a low moisture product where I've taken indigenous microbes from a local area, grown it out on a media, and gotten an extremely high fungal to bacterial ratio so that I can just spread all those fungal spores out on my cropland or spray them out in tea form and benefit from that inoculum. I get disease resistance. I actually get bug suppressing qualities from this diversity of nature. Because how many guys know that many bugs have a fungal predator? You know, a lot of things, and you know, these expensive treatments that we can get from our local Bavaria Bassiana salesmen actually are already in our soil, and we can get them established in such a way that we're actually getting natural disease resistance just by having the diversity present. Now, do we totally have perfect data for all of this? You know, no. We know it works. We know that it exists in nature, but we can be okay with not isolating every strain of microbial life that we're applying. We can benefit because it's already working. So I'm going for my farm because of trees, and really for your farms as well. Cannabis loves a higher fungal to bacterial ratio. It's not like lettuce or something like that. We're closer to a shrub or a tree, and so you're anywhere from 20 to 30 to 1 of fungal to bacterial ratio that your plant likes. And I know you've heard this a lot this weekend, but I just want to encourage you, understanding where you are in fungal to bacterial ratio in your growing media or your root zone is super important. You think all nutrients, and I want to get the right nutrients, If your plant is in a 1-to-1 fungal to bacterial soil, you're going to have a deficiency of nutrients. Even if you spent all the money on all the best things, you're going to have a deficiency in uptake. And that's all, it can be almost free resolving that. So I just really want to say again, I know you've already heard, but understanding fungal to bacterial ratio, if you leave with something you didn't have before, wrapping your head, going down the rabbit trail of that, strongly encourage that. So you have disease-suppressing fungi and all kinds of cool things. So I'm looking for my total fungi. Because this is dormant, this is not the same as active fungi. Remember, this is a dry material, so what those are is those really cool circular fungal spores like we had in this thing here. So these guys will sit in a dry environment just waiting for you to reintroduce water, and they'll all wake up and create hypha and go to town, breaking down your nutrients and making them plant available. And then, yeah, total fungi to total bacteria. Here's another one. You have disease suppressing fungi, which is awesome. So many times I see these deficiencies that people are posting, and it's like, yes, you can do a foliar micronutrient and probably get a correction there. But if you understood tending to the microbial life of your soil and getting balance or the right ratio of fungi to bacteria, you probably wouldn't have that issue in the first place. And so, do you want to chase the deficiency, or do you want to, and we switched. So on our farm, we've taken soil and tissue culture or tissue tests for 20 years, and with our soil analysis, we'd have these pH problems, and they'd be like 2 tons of lime per acre, for the growing season. You go buy the lime and apply it, and then we'd have the same prescription for 10 years running. I'm like, I don't think we're correcting the problem. We're going, and now, since we've switched to tending to the microbial life of the soil, we actually have never had a pH problem. Our pH is perfect for our crop. It's a funny thing. We never apply lime anymore. So, yeah, just the encouragement to think of this as a living system and tending to that properly, and not really having to chase as much in the microbial or micronutrient. So as we made this change on some of our orchard, we did about half-half to start. We had 360 or 400 conventional and 360 organic, and we would submit our soil and tissue to the analyst, and initially, before we started, we have these soil deficiencies that showed up in the tissue. And he's like, oh, you gotta do this much, da-da-da-da. And then as we changed and started tending to the microbial life of the soil, we'd submit the tissue and the soil, and he'd be like, wow, you have all these deficiencies in your soil, but I'm not seeing any of them in the tissue. I'm not seeing any of them in your leaves. Your leaves are perfect. And so we had to explain to him, this is what we're doing, we're thinking we're getting better nutrient uptake, etc. And so the next year when we submitted our soil and tissue, he put an asterisk, a little star. He said, unless there's high quantity of microbial life present. So he had a recommendation on our soil analysis, like, oh, this is what you're gonna need unless there's high microbial life present. Because he couldn't understand, he didn't know what he was looking at. He didn't understand what was happening on our farm. He couldn't make a recommendation with his scientific knowledge because he's not seen any of the deficiencies in our leaves. Does that make sense? So all of a sudden, that whole testing system was broken for us. And it's no longer our soil nutrient analysis is no longer a good representation of our uptake or what's available to our trees, because our trees have microbial relationships in their root zones. And so they're getting all these nutrients that aren't even showing up on the soil analysis. Does that make sense? You guys are with me? Cool. So I stand here to tell you that it's commercially viable and scalable to tend to the microbial life in the soil using this Korean natural farming. And let me say this, because you guys know me as somebody that shares Korean natural farming. I don't believe it's the only way to tend to the microbial life of the soil. I love Elaine Ingham's information. She taught me fungal to bacterial ratio. I didn't understand that when I started, and I was working hard to try and tend to the microbial life in the trees, and I had an experiment gone wrong where I applied something somebody else made, and my 5 acres of trees yellowed overnight. And I was like, what did I do? And she came to town that next week, and I took a week-long class with her. She taught me the microscope. I bought a microscope. I go and look at this stuff I applied. It's all bacterial. I grow trees. My tree's like 1,000 to 1 or 30 to 1,000 to 1 fungal. And I applied something that imbalanced them bacterially, and they were telling me they're not happy. And so that was huge for me. And so you know, I'm just saying you can take those principles, and this is an elegant method to apply them. There's methods all over the world that are super cool and have been passed down by farmers for generations. And I believe farmers were some of the best scientists before we had universities, because science is the study of nature through observation and experimentation. And who's better at observing their crops than farmers, right? And who's better at doing experiments than farmers, because they never want to do an experiment that failed next year, right? So the things they passed down weren't like, oh, you know, like the community didn't go, oh yeah, that farmer, his crops always die and he's trying to sell us this method he's using. You know, they wouldn't use that again. They wouldn't teach his son that thing, you know? So if we have this 1,000-year-old practice of tending to the microbial life of the soil, and now we're seeing it lines up beautifully with what we understand of science, we can say, oh yeah, they were using science even before they had a microscope, because they were observing and experimenting and taking what worked. Because a farmer is basing their livelihood on what works or doesn't, so they're gonna keep doing the things that work, and they're gonna quickly cut out the things that don't work, right? So, natural farming is just an elegant method. It's something I found, it helped me apply these principles quickly and efficiently on a large scale. One of my favorite things about all of this and about this whole conference is we are gaining tools to understand and partner with natural law. Your understanding based on scientific realities, all of a sudden you can observe something and make judgments, analysis with pretty good information. And so your hypothesis became educated guesses, and you can make decisions or movements as a farmer that are actually going to help you because you have understanding. You're not just, I have no idea what's going on here. See, when you're doing things from a chemical standpoint, you actually have no concept of the flow of nutrients. You're just giving nutrients. And so as we step into, there's relationships here, and this is how nutrients are taken up, all of a sudden you have, my water is causing the aerobic fungi, my overwatering is causing the aerobic fungi to have no oxygen, and so I'm getting imbalanced bacterially, and I have these deficiencies, and you're seeing things. That's my favorite part, is that you as a farmer, through this knowledge, can gain tools to make analysis and educated guesses to increase your profitability in production. So, observation becomes a very important tool for a farmer. This is a study done by University of Hawaii, Manoa, by Kun Hui Wang, a friend of mine, and I want to cruise through this real quickly. I don't want to spend a lot of time here, just because I think you've had a lot of cool science, and I want to talk a little bit more of application. But this one's neat. They did this is telling about it, but this is a little easier to differentiate. They did 8 kind of side-by-side rows with corn. They did a standard grower practice, which is like a conventional grower practice, so fertilizers plus a weekly horticultural micronutrient mix, so 100% fertilizer. They did a control, no treatment at all. They did IMO, number 4, which is just stages of growing it out. And then a foliar nutrient spray, which is very light, very little, almost homeopathic. And then you have EM with 50% of the standard grower fertilizer. So bringing in organic fertilizers and 50% of a standard rate. 2 applications, they did it kind of continually, and then Sumagrow, Mycos. So these are all plant based inoculums you can get plus fertilizer. And they did these all side by side. Corn hype, IMO, Mycos, and standard were pretty similar. IMO's here with being a little taller 5 weeks after planting. Total fruit weight, IMO beat everything. Not by a whole lot though. Standard growing practice and 50% fertilizer, EM, was close. This study was funded by EM, an EM company, and they were allowed to take it down because they didn't like the results, so it's not on the internet. But I have it, and so does University of Hawaii Manoa. Total plant biomass, standard grower practice was slightly higher. IMO and these were all pretty comparable. Fruit weight, few of these produce comparable yields as the standard grower practice. Similar, slightly higher fruit counts as the standard grower practice and IMO and some of the other things. However, it was noteworthy that the microorganism treatment did comparably well with only 1 to 2 applications up front versus the standard practice, which included 100% conventional fertilizers and weekly micronutrient foliar applications. So here's the part that I have a little bit of issue with, is that this is a really cool study and we see some neat results, but we don't see the costs of those comparably. Now, all those, I know because I know what it costs to buy some of these things, but this is way more expensive than this, and these all, you're buying off-the-shelf retail products, and I'm sorry for retail product sellers. I'm not against that in any way. I'm just saying, when you guys start having to sharpen your pencil and look at your bottom line, knowing with the research what the costs are and how to balance that is going to be valuable information. So I guess a little bit of a push for research that does bring into consideration the cost for a farmer. And so what I take away from this is, wow, for 1 cent on the dollar, I can get comparable yields. I don't even care if they're the same yields or slightly lower. If I'm making about 100% more per pound, or whatever, 50% more per pound, that's a big deal. And so, for your information, so this is our nut farm, and we use 100% of these natural farming practices, and our costs are comparable to conventional, because we have to mow now, where conventional just sprays Roundup, torches their whole floor, and then our yields are a little higher than conventional. This is one of the fathers, if you will, of natural farming, and he said the ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. And I think as you guys look at all of this, what you're doing, what you're taking in, what you're affecting in your environment, and how you feel about it also matters. That has a value. So I'm just, you're on the right track in hanging out here. Definitely further research needed. I love research. I'm pretty nerdy when it comes to doing trials and analysis. So if you have somebody that wants help with natural farming research, give me a call. I'd love to be involved. And so feel free also to contact me. I have to take off today. This particular trip was kind of tight for me. So I'm not going to hang out all night to answer questions. I'm sorry about that. But feel free. Hit me up and ask me anything. Like Suzanne, how many guys have had responses from me on the internet via Instagram or stuff? Yeah, I'll answer eventually. So, all right, I'm gonna show you now. We're gonna jump into a little bit of the application. All right, so in natural farming, we are, there's some theory involved in applying nutrients that I've found to be really effective. And so the theory is the right amount at the right time. So the power becomes in the hands of the farmer in observation. So it's not front load all your nutrients in the beginning, as much as it is that a plant, like a human being, goes through stages of life where it needs different it has different nutritional needs. This is kind of out of order because I need to explain this, but the Toolkit Simplified, and that's kind of what this sheet is that Josh was holding up. It's basically what I wish I would have had when I started natural farming, something to kind of keep me on track, help me remember all these kind of recipes, and even with a dry erase marker, being able to check off when I'm making things. But we have a baby food or a maintenance type spray. We have a type 2. I'll show what all these are in a minute. Food for rapid growth, so that's your veg. There's changeover food for that period of time where a plant kind of shifts its nutrient needs, and then stuff to help it deal with all that stored nitrogen. and produce the structure necessary for good production. And then liquid IMO is something that kind of my contribution in a way to natural farming. It's a slightly different recipe that came out of Korea. All right, so you and I are one is part of this philosophy in natural farming, to use human life cycle as analogous to plant life cycles, to help us wrap our heads around the concept that a plant doesn't need its midlife food when it's a seedling. We have an infancy in humans, and we understand that. A baby, when it's born, needs colostrum and then milk, these very small amounts of food. We instinctually know that we never want to give our 3-day-old infant steak. We know that. We're never going to do that. It's intuitive, right? However, we'll take a new seedling and put it in extremely dense, nutrient-rich soil. We'll transplant into something where we're trying to get all the soil there ahead of time, all the nutrients. And I would venture to say you're actually limiting your plant's total potential by not letting it struggle with a small amount of nutrients at a young age, where it's going to be that much better at taking up nutrients when it really needs it. So, concept as it relates to children, we have a rapid growth stage. So we have this infant stage, like him. If I give him a 4-course meal, at 1 or however old he is, this is my son Logan, and it wouldn't be quite right for him if I tried to make him eat my portions, right? I'm different. We know that, but do we do that? Do we apply that to plants? I would say wrongly we don't. We try, and so this is the concept, that we can take the concept of different nutritional needs in its life cycle as we already intuitively understand it in humans, and think about it as it relates to plants. So, in a human being, we go through an infancy, we go through a young child, where we're starting to get more nutrients, and then we get into the next stage where this guy, basically, as much as I can push into him food-wise, he's gonna stay beanpole skinny and burn it all off because he's just growing like crazy, making structure, right? He can't eat too much. You can't put a 10-year-old on a diet because they are every bit of food you give them. See, your plants go through this. In vegetative growth, like if they have all their food, they just do really well. And if they have proper microbial connections, they're gonna take everything they need and they're gonna thrive. And you can't really overfeed them. But this guy, I could overfeed. I could do the wrong, he's gonna get, but even at his age, he's actually almost past the place of overfeeding them. It's the infant, that you don't wanna feed steak to. So, I know that's kind of like, well, why is he talking about human beings and plants? I don't really understand. It's kind of a strange analogy, but I have found, by doing it over the last 10 years, that I actually get better yields if I let my seedlings struggle with a low nutrient than if I give them a ton of nutrients to start. I'm talking better yields like a month later. Why? Well, it's because I'm training a plant to eat for its life. I'm training a plant, and so with low nutrient needs in the beginning of its life, it actually is like, I need to work on these roots, and I need to make relationships, and it starts pushing for nutritional uptake in the early stage rather than saying, everything I need is here, I'm gonna get fat and lazy, right? And so all of a sudden, when it's time to grow, it focused on roots and et cetera, and nutrient uptake in its early age. And now, when it's time to jam and eat and grow like crazy, it's actually doing that better than if I had fed it like crazy from a young age. This is kind of the concept. So for example, there's seed soak, which is a very light nutritional thing, and this is pictures I'm using of Wendy's by permission. She had, she used seed soak rather than just water, and she had 100% germination in about 10 hours, so quickly she wasn't ready for it. And then those, even just with SES, she has, somehow the seeds are showing a little bit better health at several weeks old than stuff with fulvic acid and, you know, a bunch of extra food. So this lesser food, then adding a bunch of things, she's actually seen better results. This is applied to everything though. I'm seeing this everywhere. So this is just a for example. So what do you mean? So there's also this concept that every plant goes through different stages. Stages of skinniness, stages of fatness. You go back to, you know, these guys. He's round, and how many of you guys know that kids, they get little round and then they shoot up? And then they get round and then they shoot up, right? You've seen that? Little pudgy, and then you see them next year and they're like 2 feet taller and beanpole. You know, it's what happens with kids. Like this guy looked like this, you know, but now he's like all bones and knees and stuff. You know, so these are different, they have different nutritional needs. This guy needs, you know, his calcium to help produce structure to grow and process all this stored energy and fat. This guy probably just needs as much fat as I can put in him, right? He needs high energy, etc. So plants are the same way. These plants all are showing us and telling us different things. Your plants do the same. So we'll do a little game. So let's say we have vegetative, which is high nitrogen food. This is foods in natural farming. These really light, targeted foods for the right amount of nutrients at the right time. So we have vegetative growth, which is type 2. We have changeover, which is to help a plant go from vegetative growth to fruit production. And then we have type 3, which has more calcium, helps it work with some of its stored nitrogen and produce structure and grow so that it can produce more crop. So what is this plant telling us it needs? This is kind of a trick question with what I just explained to you, but what is it kind of saying? What kid would you say that looks like? Short and fat, right? He's kind of round, kind of looks like he has a lot of nitrogen, but maybe it could use something else. So this one would need type 3. We would apply some calcium here. We would give it the amount, the nutrient it needs. It doesn't need more nitrogen right now, right? That plant's not saying, give me more nitrogen. It's saying, hey, I might need something to balance some of my nitrogen. Maybe somebody loaded me up with a ton of fertilizer here, right? You with me? You kind of see that? All right. So what is this plant telling us? It's kind of hard to see. It's from far away, but yeah, it's just beginning to have little nodes show up here. So it's getting ready to fruit, and so it's going to shift its nutrient needs right now. So we do changeover. And then what is this plant telling us? It probably needs a little food, right? It's like, hey, I'm hungry. So we would give it type 2 with some nitrogen mix in it. So the reason I showed this, I know this isn't your crop, but the reason I showed this, and maybe I'll get some crop pictures. I'll get some cannabis pictures next time. I'm sorry, but the reason that I showed this is, do you see how you, as the farmer, actually, if you have the tool, the nutrient tool in your pocket, that can be it's really micronized nutrients, so they're easily taken up foliarly or with soil drench. Do you see how you all of a sudden have a tool to feed them the right amount of nutrient at the right time? You can take a plant and you'll actually get higher yields with less costs in reality. I'm not talking about lessening your yields because you're not using the right nutrients or the right amount of nutrients. I'm talking about pushing on yields because a plant gets everything it needs when it needs it. So these are the recipes again. So here's kind of the base. All of these have this. So it's a brown rice vinegar, an OHN, and a fermented plant juice. And they're used in very small quantities. And then you add in, on top of that recipe, you add in a fish amino acid, so this is your high nitrogen. Or you add in a calcium phosphate, so your phosphorus comes in for changeover. Or you add a calcium, highly micronized plant available calcium for that fat plant. So that one guy would get the calcium, that guy would get the changeover, that guy would get the nitrogen. And the plants go through stages of needing different ones of these throughout. So you might have a plant that's in production, but maybe it starts needing a little nitrogen. You can bring back in the nitrogen at that time, even though it's gone into flower. But you can do it through soil drench, so you're not spraying on the foliar. So this is the same thing. This is kind of what the sheet has, and natural farming is a bit of a rabbit hole. So I teach a 5-day intensive class. I'll be doing one in Boise in August. It's on my website, naturalfarming.co. I also teach this, applying this stuff in like a 45-minute class online that you can just watch online, and I send you some documents that go with it. Because it's a technique, it's an art, it's learning how to do something that's skill-based. Yeah?
Chris, your examples are always so beautiful, and when I share my preparations with folks and I tell them mix at 1,000 to 1, they're like, shut up, that's not going to do anything. How do you explain to people how such a small amount can have such a big impact?
I show them that I have 25% higher yields than them. It's really hard to convince people of these things. They're like, nobody does it like that. You can't be right. Okay? But you bring them to your farm and you show them, and say, hey, my fertilizer costs are like 1/10 of what yours are. Wow, your plants look way better than mine. Yeah, you want to learn about this? It's a much easier sale then. So showing people is the best way I've found to do it. But explaining to them is hard. But if they're up for kind of like checking their extension agent knowledge at the door, you can say, look at how nature does it. Microbes live on the leaf surface and they can actually process gas nitrogen into plant available nitrogen. The air can actually feed your plants if you have the right microbial life on your foliage. The rain falls, it's full of nitrogen, it drips off the plants into the drip line, thank you. Drips into the drip line where all the feeder roots are, this is how nature fertilizes, and there's all kinds of nitrogen in the soil. It's difficult. That's a great question. How do you convince people that you can farm a different way?
Well, the example that I use is that I just tell them it's like homeopathic medicine, kind of like a little bit turns on systems, and I don't know if that's legit or not, but people go, oh yeah, and that's enough.
Yeah, but commercial farmers are gonna be like, homeopathic, yeah, thanks man. Yeah, I'm not gonna put my livelihood on your, boo-boo yah hippie stuff. And it's hard. That's a great question. It's hard. How do you convince others to give this a try? And I had a lot of kind of pushback in our industry, in my family of farming together. We had pushback, and finally everybody's like, oh no, we're doing this. And then my peers in the industry are like, will you come to China and speak to our international research? Will you be on our research board? And and these things are from them looking. The head of the International Macadamia Society came to our farm and he's like, I don't see trees like this anywhere. I want to hear what you have to say about it. And so the best way to do it is show them. And so in Humboldt, I had a few of the farmers get up. Eddie he came to our class, and he's profitable with this. He has a pretty big grow. Josh, how much area does Eddie farm? Josh stepped out, but it's, guys are using this on cannabis. Wendy's using this on cannabis and getting yields, real yields, and their fertilizer costs are going down. So, anyways, it's a great question. Hard to explain, or hard to convince people without just showing them. But yeah, I'd love to take more questions. I have a little bit of time left to take questions, I think, so ask away.
Can I buy your nuts?
You said you mow under the trees, or you have to mow.
Yep, I mow.
What if you just left? Or is there?
The grass would grow 5-6 feet high, and we mechanically harvest off the ground. You know those things that pick up golf balls on the driving range? Some of our harvesters look like that, and so we need to keep it kind of turf-like. Yeah, and then we sell to processors our nuts right now. One of our processors is making an organic package on my Instagram that it shows them. We don't really get paid when they sell things though. We get paid as a farmer, so we get a bulk unprocessed rate, so you're not helping our farm. But they're incredibly tasty. You can ask Layton. Yeah.
On that last one, you showed, what is like the OHN and the VRV stand?
Brown rice vinegar. So vinegar helps to micronize your water particles. It actually helps for the whole solution to be micronized or easily taken up. It actually has a bunch of cool properties. And then OHN, I actually sell it on the website because it's a 3-month process to make. But I teach you how to make it on YouTube. It's really doable. It's not hard. It's just kind of tedious. So people are like, I want to start tomorrow. And I'm like, it takes 3 months to get started. So I did make that, and you can buy it just until you get yours going. Yeah.
BJ.
Yeah, making an IMO collection, I had two failed attempts before I actually got it right last summer, but I tried late in the season and sent you some pictures, and I had a lot of molds in the culture. When's the best time of the year? Because come September, we're 85, 90% humidity, 40 degrees.
Right.
When's the best time of the year to do an IMO collection?
So this question is, when is the best time of year to collect IMO? That's the IMO 1. So that's you getting that initial inoculum out of the forest. And ideally, as a farmer, this is the cool part about IMO too. I always say when people are like, well, Elaine or Cho, natural farming or soil food web, I'm like, no. We can take all this information and benefit from it as farmers. And so if Elaine had IMO 2 on her shelf, she would have benefited. If these Koreans, Cho Han Yu, had the understanding of fungal bacterial ratios, they would have been super helped. So we can learn from all of it. It's a good time to be alive and understanding microbial life in the soil. But ideally, as a farmer, I would have an inoculum from each season over a 3-year period on my shelf. So I'd have a spring, summer, fall. Maybe I can't harvest in winter, it's difficult, over 3 years. And they're all shelf stable. And then when I go to make some of this material, I just have a scoop from each one, and I have diversity over, rainy season, dry season, all these different microbes that thrive or diminish depending on the season are all inoculated. And so that's ideal, but maybe you have 3, maybe you have spring, summer, fall over a couple of years, but they do keep for several years. So now instead of me having to run out and grab material to inoculate my compost each time, I have them on my shelf, they're stored inside and kept safe, because those are really valuable to me. So yeah, every time is a good time to collect it, but you do have to vary. Sometimes if it's like, we had a good collection at 105 degrees in the desert in Idaho this last summer, and I had to make a little wetter rice so that it wouldn't dry out before the collection got to bloom and everything. Good question. You're talking about the different inputs. Yeah, so there are things that are vinegar based, WCA, WCAP, it's pretty much infinite. OHN, it only gets better with age. FPJs, I usually figure about 6 months before they start to change, maybe not in a positive way if I'm stored in a cool, dark place, but if you do have really nice storage, kind of like on concrete, cool, dark, you know, not super hot, definitely out of direct sunlight, they can keep a lot longer, FPJs can. LAB is something you store in the fridge, or some people saturate with sugar. I would say 3 months is max with LAB before you start to really have a fall off of quality. Just make it pretty periodically. What am I missing? FAA gets better with age. That doesn't have a shelf life. Yeah, totally.
Are there certain components that should be
What do you mean, Steve?
refrigerated?
Oh, nothing.
Okay.
Go ahead. Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna
Are
ask a
there
question.
other components that should be refrigerated besides the LAB?
Besides LAB, no, you don't have to refrigerate. All right, I'm gonna.
I'll hand it to the next.
You can refrigerate LAB. I wouldn't refrigerate. You don't really need to refrigerate other things. I'm gonna run a random video in the background. We have just a few more minutes before we have to get off.
I got a
But
question.
this will just be fun to watch some of the things we're doing on our farm. So there's a spraying. Oh,
We had a question from the online. They asked, what is SW and what is FPJ?
what? Okay, so SW. How do I make this play? SW is seawater. Did I go to like a different screen? Oh yeah, I did. So SW is ocean water, which I'll explain right now. That is awkward. There we go. So this is a spraying liquid IMO on the farm. It's a lot of fun. So SW is seawater. Plants have salinity in their blood, so to speak, of about a 1 to 30 dilution of seawater. So when we take seawater and dilute it 1 to 30, we're basically treating plants with their cytoplasm, if you will. We have the same thing in our blood. We have basically seawater too, right? So using some seawater is a great way to get some minor minerals, etc. And then, what was the other one? Seawater and what?
FPJ.
FPJ, fermented plant juice. I have a video on it. You can check it out on YouTube. Just search Chris Trump FPJ, and it'll take you on the whole process on how to do it. And it's a great plant food, basically, is what you're getting from that. It's a good plant food. And you have beneficial biochemicals that exist there too. Yeah, man.
Do you have a favorite dynamic accumulator?
Yeah, so
Repeat.
how do you choose a plant for FPJ is what he's asking. Yeah, and that's a great question. So what I look for is health. So if a plant is always crazy healthy, always grows like crazy, and the bugs never mess with it, it's doing a really good job of taking up nutrients and making relationships in that soil, in that environment. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'm looking not so much for, I know people are like, whoa, that really cool plant that has all these things we know about. What about the things we don't know about, you know? So I'm looking, we actually know, I'm sorry, I keep knocking what we know, but we know very little about a lot of these things. We're trying to understand how beneficial biochemicals interact when we apply them to our plants, but we are just beginning to understand that. It's cutting edge research that is still in the experimental stage. But if I take, we use kelp. Why do we use kelp? Because kelp grows like crazy. It never gets sick. It's always going nuts, right? It has some of the best biochemicals in nature as far as plant growth hormone. A lot of the plants in your environment that you are literally blind to, this is the thing, you gotta put your goggles back on of, I am looking for things that are healthy, because all the things that are the best for FPJ, you're literally blind to because you see them every day and you come to ignore them. They're your ivy or your ice plant or your sour grass or whatever, all these random things that grow everywhere, no one ever has to take care of them, but they're always thriving and always beautiful and lush, and the bugs never mess with them. You know, those are the good things to choose for FPJ. Yeah, pond weeds can work. You had a question here?
How would I, specifically, how do I apply this to well
This is our lab. No, it's still talking. I can't turn off the volume, can I? Sorry. Is that showing up in your feed? I'll turn it off. Okay. Sorry, ask your question again. Yeah, so same way you apply it to anything. You're going to have to choose your application method. How would I apply it to row crops was this question. Application method is something you're going to have to decide for yourself. You can apply IMO4 at 330 pounds per quarter acre. I have a video on showing how to apply IMO4. You saw the video of me throwing out with a compost thrower. That's how you could apply a solid IMO. Or you can do it foliarly with a liquid IMO.
Okay, well, I guess my question would be this: since you have huge acreage, right? You can't drive through your corn row, your soy, your wheat, or anything like that. And then, like, when you got a crop duster, but those are hard to find. Backpack sprayers.
Yeah, I think you're just gonna have to figure that out for your farm, man. We can just skip that. I stopped talking pretty quick. You can just skip ahead on that video, or we can turn it off. Yeah, whatever your farm is, you're gonna have to figure out your application methods. I can't answer that for you. There's all kinds of, so that's another encouragement I just have as a commercial farmer. Don't step away from ag knowledge. Ag knowledge serves you. It doesn't have to be cannabis specific ag knowledge. Go to a trade show where they're selling equipment for row crops and farmers. You're gonna find all kinds of cool knickknacks that nobody in the cannabis community are even talking about. There's one in Tulare, California. Just walk through the booths. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that people have made for efficiency and etc. You had a question?
Yeah, if you're familiar with the unconventional farmer, I just was curious.
Gil Rabane,
I think.
What's that?
I just was curious if you. What
Gil's done is he farms in the Philippines. He learned natural farming also from Johanyu, and he's just adapted to what works for him on his farm in the Philippines. And so these are methods that are more about understanding nature than they are about giving you something you have to do it exactly this way. Now, let me speak to that real quick. So that's a great question. Should you, as somebody that doesn't know natural farming, go and just change all of it because you, as an American, can do everything better as soon as you see something done? This is our curse as Americans. We're extremely innovative, we're good, we want to discover new things, but we will take a 100-year, 300-year practice and we will improve on it before we even try it. And I'll just tell you right now, you won't improve on it before you understand it. It's really actually quite good. Wendy, can I put you on the spot? So Wendy, for example, was like, well, if SES works, well, SES, sorry. We're not gonna improve on that, I don't think right now. If this seed treatment works, then seed treatment plus fulvic acid will just work better. Well, she had about a 40% germination rate with seed treatment plus fulvic acid, and the side-by-side with 100% in just seed treatment. And months later, and she should tell the story, but just, it wasn't an improvement. It seemed only reasonable that it would be, right? More is better. But this isn't about that. This is actually about something that's stood the test of time and had a lot of experimentation. So I would encourage you to kind of play with it and learn from it as it is before you improve on it. So Gil has played with it a long time and he's made some changes that work for him. I would encourage you to, yes, learn from that, but at the same time, also seek that understanding of nature that allowed him to make changes that work for him on his farm.
What's in your totes there?
Oh, this is me making a 90,000 pound pile of IMO3. So that's actually wheat mill run from a mill in Hawaii. And this is wood chips. I'm getting my wood chips ready to lay down the mill run on top of. That's my liquid IMO inoculum right here. I'll spray on all of it. And that was beautiful. I had incredible fungal hyphae and everything. Yeah, and then there's trees. Yeah.
You said you only have 2 people working on your farm. Did your labor go down as well?
No, our labor increased a little bit.
Okay.
We had to hire a mower.
Right.
But for all the cost to buy the inputs, to apply them, we spray 3 times a year our nutrients, and we do some composting. We make some compost from our byproducts. Our costs are about $27 per acre per year to apply natural farming inputs. So, and
How does that compare to other conventional farmers in your area?
So, comparable.
Yeah.
Comparable to a conventional cost, but maybe a little less. Yeah.
How often do you like to give lactobacillus throughout the life cycle of a plant? Like when
So, lactic acid bacteria in the cannabis online world is the central point of natural farming. In actual natural farming, it has this tiny little role on the side. It's really not a main player. When you make IMO, lactic acid bacteria and all kinds of other species of bacteria are so easy, and they're in the right balance. It has a ton of uses, and it's really great in nature, and it makes up 70% of our gut microbial community, so it's really important, but it really is only used more in the finishing or towards the kind of ripening of your plant. So you'd use it maybe as a soil drench with seawater towards the end of your plant to help it really finish off with those good flavors and get those beneficial minor minerals. Yeah.
The seawater in Hawaii is pretty available. Where would
So if you're landlocked and you don't have access to seawater, get some cheap, you can find places where you get agricultural sea salt, basically. So don't go to the store and buy the little packet of sea salt for, $10 and try and make that work. Go find some, 30-pound bag that they'll sell you of sea salt from Korea or somewhere, and then put it 30 grams per liter gives you seawater, and then 1 gram per liter gives you a 1 to 30 dilution, which is good for application. So that's how you apply sea salt to water to get seawater. Yeah.
You still farming animals, and is there a role for animals in this?
Totally a role for animals in this. I farm a tiny bit of chickens right now in Boise, Idaho. We farm 200 hair sheep in Hawaii, which is a hobby for us. But treating grassland is incredibly effective with natural farming. How am I doing on time, Josh? Is he not here? Oh, I still got a little bit, right? 8 minutes, okay. Chicken farming and Korean natural farming is really the jewel of natural farming. There's so many cool things, but a lot of chicken farming, pig farming, cattle farming, it's really focused on, or a huge part of it is IMO4 in their food and IMO4 in their living environment, in their soils to deal with poop. So pigs, there's no smell piggeries, and you never have to change the litter. Their poop will get turned into white vitamin crackers, and they'll dig for it and eat it and be the better for it. You won't have any diseases. It's really incredible. And chicken's the same way. I have a chicken coop that I've run for a year at our new place in Boise, and we've never cleaned out chicken poop. We won't ever have to. It's just the microbes break it down. They dig in it. They eat in their litter, and it's full of bugs and etc. I don't have a YouTube video on chickens. I will by summertime. I have all the footage and stuff. I've just not put it together. Yeah. So
What do you use for your chicken coop litter?
Say that again?
What do you use for your litter?
Wood chips and IMO4. Some biochar if you can get it, and a little bit of sea salt. I do have a video on how to make the floor for a chicken coop. That's on my YouTube. and the floor for a piggery. Yeah.
What does FAA and SES stand for?
FAA is fish amino acids. There's a video on how to make it. It's basically getting fish waste for free, adding some sugar to it, and leaving it sit for 6 months, and you basically have patis or fish sauce, but it is highly micronized nitrogen source that's really plant available. Yeah, man.
I'm just curious about, like, I see some of the pictures of people laying in IMO piles. If you can speak on that, like how that, like,
IMO bad. Oh, is this me talking again? I'm gonna stop this, guys. This guy is getting annoying. This is our nut processing facilities where we husk them and we use all our byproducts. Oops, I skipped. All right, goodbye. Why'd you ask me? Oh, IMO baths. Yeah, they have IMO spas in Korea. It's a big thing. So it's kind of fun. So do you know that a lot, like cancer can't thrive in an extremely hot environment, that our bodies can actually live in an environment temperature-wise that cancer can't thrive in? So the idea is superheat, and we can actually come through that just like we get fevers and we survive fevers, right? Well, it's a health treatment, and then the microbes are, our skin is designed to house and interact with microbial life. I use a deodorant that's LAB. It's amazing. And never smell even when I'm working like crazy. So so you lay in these. It's super hot. They bury you up to here. It's a lot of fun. Very relaxing for your muscles, but it's also kind of like a, you know, so many cultures have this: steam rooms, saunas, Indian sweat tents, all these places to get your body hot for health purposes. And there's something to it. I don't know. It felt good. I've done it a couple times. Yeah.
Touched on when to collect IMO. How about where?
Great question. Where should we collect IMO 1? You want to look for a place of health. So I was out in Washington, an Indian reservation, and it was early spring and things were kind of dryish and kind of dead still from winter, just beginning to wake up. And everything's brown. We're cruising along, and we can get IMO from those places. It's totally possible. Then on the hill, I saw this kind of like swath of health, and I was like, oh, there's probably some water there, but there's also a general life. And so we went in there and found beautiful mycelium and stuff in kind of a forest area. But what you want to look for is, one, visible health of the vegetation there, right? Because that's a marker that there's good stuff going on, because nobody's tending to it. It's not like, oh, that place got fertilized. There's something positive happening. And then you want to go to a place with as little human interaction for as long as possible. So 1,000 years undisturbed, great place to go. Because what's going to happen is that's create, for example, in Hawaii, we were in sugarcane for a long time. There's a place near where I farm where I had a conversation. I was up there actually collecting IMO, and I had a conversation with a soil microbiologist who worked for University of Hawaii, and he was doing a trial up there. And he said, just on this side of the fence line up the hill has never been in cane, has never been in any cultivation other than, you know, ancient Hawaiian practices. Down the hill, we've been in cane and we use some gnarly stuff. And he's like, I have 10 times the diversity 100 feet away uphill than I do downhill, where it's been. So this is the effect that a disturbed farming practice can have on the diversity that nature can form over time. So that was a research project he was working on. So if you have something that got scraped and cleared, and then they put topsoil back in to build a house or a place, and then you go there, you know, that's going to have limited diversity. People are like, oh, look, I got some things to bloom in my rice pot. It's like, yes, that is real microbial life. But that diversity is not going to serve you from disease-suppressing, help with plant flower plasticity necessarily. You probably have 1 or 2 microbes. And yes, you can see them with your naked eye, but you know I don't have a lot of diversity there, or somebody harvests in their worm bin. Worm bins have great microbial life, and worms knock out E. coli with their bodies and stuff, and it's all good, but it doesn't have the diversity of a 1,000-year-old forest. You with me? So that's, you want to collect somewhere if you can go and find something undisturbed. Now, what if that's 10 miles from my place, or what if it's a 30-minute drive? If it's generally the same microclimate, I'm okay with that.
Is it too far away?
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I couldn't, but I know that getting a totally different climate, you're gonna, it's not gonna have the same, and you want to make IMO3 to IMO4 with your local soil, so that you're introducing them to the your soil's microarthropods and nematodes and all that good stuff. So.
How much soil are you supposed to collect, and are you supposed to dig down a little to get into your stuff, or does it matter?
For IMO4 to bring in that soil? Yeah, you want as much soil as IMO3 you have, so equal by mass, so more by weight than by volume. IMO3 will often be light and fluffy, and so you're going to use a little less soil if you look at the piles next to each other. And then if you can, you collect it from a couple places in your farmland, and if you can get some red soil, some of that iron-rich, if you have red soil in your area, that's great too. Yeah, so 25% red soil, 25% farm or your area soil, and then 50% IMO3 is ideal for that.
So, I know like people who live in the city and like people who live in the country are kind of like, in Michigan, everything's basically at one point been cut down and devastated by human beings, right? And so, say, like I live in Ann Arbor, there's like a state park like 30 miles west. Is that probably where you would go? Or would you go like, or like for somewhere like Detroit, that almost might be like one of the closest places that they could find some untapped, and that's like an hour away.
That's probably okay, because you're still getting the same kind of winter cycle, you're still getting a similar rainfall, but I would also get something closer that maybe isn't as diverse or long. So I would have a little bit from each, mingle them all when you make your IMO3.
What about like abandoned alleyways that you've known to abandon for like 20 years? I'm serious.
You can do whatever you want. Ultimately, you're king on your farm. You got to make good choices as best you can.
Well, yeah, dude. But if you're in a warehouse downtown Detroit and like you're trying to gather local indigenous microorganisms, it's not a joke.
No, I wasn't thinking it was a joke. I know what you're saying. I can't answer all of that. Is I guess what I'm saying. You're gonna have, if you're thinking, wow, there's some thriving plant life here, I'm gonna collect here. What I would say though is if you do that alleyway, make sure you have some from that park too. Don't just do the alleyway IMO2 to IMO3. Try and get a few places, even if that park's an hour away and maybe it's too far, you're still gonna get a much better diversity from that. I mean, 100 to 1 diversity-wise, and even though maybe that isn't all perfect for your environment, you're still gonna get a lot from that. So I would probably lean personally to the park than the alleyway for the sake of diversity. But I hear you, you gotta do, you literally can do that though. You can farm with the stuff you get anywhere, and it's your own inoculum, and it's probably better than many things you can get on the shelf. It really is. I mean, you're getting, it's active and right there, ready to go. Yeah.
Making IMO like your indoor grow room?
Off last year's beds?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Did it go well?
No, I'm asking you.
Oh yeah, no. I'm saying, did last year go well? Do I want to perpetuate those things forward? That matters. Yeah, you can. Definitely. You can do all of it. I mean, you can play with these concepts and benefit from them. But just take this from my words. If you kind of just trust me, diversity is the goal. Maximize your diversity. Even if you're indoor grow, maximize your diversity. It's how nature works. It's in highly diverse environments. Yeah. You had your hand up a couple times.
I'm just curious how you get 9,000 pounds of IMO. How do you go
go out in the woods and you collect a bit? You know,
So I made
how do you culture it to that?
I made 90,000 pounds of IMO with a handful of IMO2.
So that's what I'm asking. It's the culture possibilities are pretty endless then.
Yeah, you can grow this stuff out. There's a whole process for that. Guys, I appreciate the time you gave me to speak so much, and yeah, your questions are awesome. And feel free to hit me up whenever.